Okay, welcome to 5.1. We're going to be converting units. In other words, changing from one unit to another. So we have defined numbers in chapter 1 as the amount of something. And in chapter 2, we use number lines with units to represent a quantity. So it says here, draw two number lines representing the quantity of roses using units of roses and dozens. So here's roses, and here's dozens. And things that line up vertically are equal, right? So 0 roses equals 0 dozen. And here 1 dozen equals 12 roses, and 2 dozen equals 24 roses. Note that the zeros line up, and 1 dozen is equivalent to 12 roses, right? 1 equals 12. But the units are what is key. Number 1 on each line refer to different things. So this number 1 here refers to roses, and this number 1 here refers to a dozen, 12 roses. But when they line up vertically, they're equivalent. So a conversion is a ratio indicating an equivalence of units. The formal notation 1 foot is equivalent to 12 inches is typically replaced by equals. That's what we normally do. Even though they are equal, the equivalence draws our attention to the unit, the difference in units. So here's example 5.2. We're going to use the conversion 1 dozen is equivalent to 12 roses to convert 3 dozen into roses and 16 roses into dozens. So we can set proportions up. Here's the proportion. 1 dozen is 12 roses. I want to find out how many 3 dozen are. So I can multiply the numerator by 3 and the denominator by 3. And this should look very similar to equivalent fractions. And I'll get this. So we can use the proportion and scale it by 3. And here it is on the number line. 1 dozen, 12 roses, 2 dozen, 3 dozen. The second part is we have 16 roses. We want to find out how many dozen is equivalent to 16 roses. Well, here's our conversion scale here. 1 dozen is 12 roses. Now, I don't know what you would multiply 12 by to get roses. You can figure it out, but it's a little bit more difficult. So instead, what we do is use our fundamental technique of setting up a proportion, cross-multiplying, and dividing. And we get 4/3 of a dozen. So that would go here, or here. So 16 roses is the same as 4/3 of a dozen of roses. The answer 4/3 introduces thirds as another unit we could use for conversion. For example, 1/3 is 4 roses. 2/3 would be 8 roses. 3/3, which is 1, would be 12, etc. 7/3, you can go, well, if 1/3 is 4 roses, then multiply this by 7. 7/3 is 28 roses. So here's one we'll do. There's 4 quarts of 1 gallon. Convert 4 gallons into quarts and 26 quarts into gallons. This one, 4 quarts, here's our conversion. Right? 4 quarts, I could put 1 gallon, 4 quarts, doesn't matter. As long as it's quarts, gallons, quarts, gallons. Or gallons, quarts, gallons, quarts, doesn't matter. But this is pretty simple because 1 times 4 is 4 gallons. So 4 quarts times 4 would be 16 quarts. So 1 gallon is 4 quarts. 2 gallons would be 8 quarts. So these line up vertically, these are equivalent, right? 3 gallons is 12 quarts, and finally 4 gallons is 16 quarts. So here we're going to set up a proportion. I want you to think about it, to convert 26 quarts into gallons. Now I'm going to put our ratio here, our conversion ratio. So think about what I'm going to put here. I'm going to put 1 gallon to 4 quarts. That's our ratio. So I'm going to set that ratio up. I'm going to set up a proportion. So how am I going to do that? I want to put this on pause now, and I'll put up the answer. Oops. So there is my proportion. And now all we have to do is cross multiply and divide to find out how many gallons it should be. There are in 26 quarts. I can't multiply 4 by any number that I can think of easily, so I'll just cross multiply and divide. When you do that, you're going to try and find out what that X gallons is. So we cross multiplied and divided by 4, because 4 divided by 4 is 1. 1 times X is X. X equals 26 over 4, and I change that into a mixed number by division. I got 2/4, which is the same as 1/2. So we can say that (26 quarts) is the same as 6.5 gallons. Notice this ratio here and this ratio here are the same. Just like 1/2 equals 2/4. 1/4 equals 6.5 over 26. And we'll start on 5.2 in the next video, but this is important. With mathematics, it's most often the case that several approaches can be utilized. You're not stuck with one procedure.